Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is David Sarnoff. I'm the Director of Strategic Partnerships and a certified executive coach with Loeb Leadership. And I'm so happy to be joined today by Sid Pailla. Sid, would you please introduce yourself to everybody?
Yeah, sure thing, David. Excited for the conversation today. My name is Sid Pailla. I'm the founder and CEO of Sunny Day Fund. I'm sure I'll get an opportunity to share more about what our company does. But my background is a combination of academia, strategy consulting, and the world of startups, I guess. Academically, I have a PhD in systems engineering where I focused on how we leverage behavioral economic principles to build systems, and I have been able to use that training and research to talk about everything from M&A and product strategy to organizational development and Fortune 500 and global enterprise clients. And I'm very excited to do something that I'm passionate about every day with Sunny Day Fund, where we're focused on enabling hardworking Americans to build up a bit of savings for those critical times in life when the car breaks down or something happens to the HVAC or something happens to our kids' health, as I was just joking about earlier. Uh, and Inevitably, we'll need to have some money to count on when that happens. So, essentially, lowering financial stress of individuals.
Yeah, thanks so much for that, Sid. So you and I met for the first time earlier this year at the For All Summit for the Great Place to Work. We happen to be sitting across table from each other during a break and started talking, and our conversation just kind of took a deep dive into leadership and culture and financial re, responsibility and education and this notion of financial stress. And so I just want to, if we could start off talking a little bit about the impact that Sunny Day Fun addresses when we're talking about financial well-being, financial literacy, and the opportunity to save for something that's not retirement, that's not paying your monthly bills. And so where does Sunny Day Fund meet that need?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm sure that you have picked up from the news that money is top of mind right now. I think that I just saw a news alert in about an hour ago that said that consumer sentiment is down for the fourth month in a row, and we know that money is impacting people's lives and in their respective households. How it's impacting them may be different, right? So it could be something that has to do with debt, and it has something to do with an unexpected financial emergency. It may have something to do with unexpected income loss, all right? Perhaps a significant other being part of a layoff. So there's multiple different ways that the same concept of money is impacting the individuals. Well, we know that not even from even before COVID, that people do bring their whole selves to work, whether we think that they do or not. And in this particular case, what's been really thoroughly studied is the impact of financial stress at the workplace, and it presents itself in whether people even show up on time, or when they do, if they're making mistakes at work or being as productive as they can be. For example, like if you are having to deal with your father's unemployment insurance because he's unable to navigate the respective states or commonwealths unemployment, that is something that is taking time away from both your workday and your living day as well, right? So I think that what we have seen is that because financial stress has increased, the impact of what that looks like in the workplace has also manifested in real tangible ways, whether that's productivity, impact on the 401k plan, where people are taking loans from early withdrawals, or in general, people's engagement, happiness, and of course, having a productive and happy workforce is essential to competing.
Yeah, thanks so much for that. And oftentimes, we hear that, you don't discuss money at work. And certain from a leadership standpoint, um, why should leaders be concerned about the personal finances of their employees, as opposed to whether or not they have the right computer or they have the right audio equipment? Where does that financial circumstance come into play from a leadership strategy?
Yeah, so it turns out that leadership is already playing a role in it. Ultimately, the relationship between an employer and employee, that social contract is an exchange of money for work performed, right? So yes, money is very at the very center of the conversation between an employer and employee. Now, how that money and more, if we want to put it in terms that people at the in the C-suite or HR may understand the concept of compensation benefits, how that relates to the culture of the organization, is the question I think that you're getting at. Now, in our opinion, and in our research, what's happening is individuals who are financially stressed without the proper means to be able to leverage their own compensation or their own benefits are disproportionately not showing up for work or being less productive. And there's lots of great research around this. So ARP, like the retirement organization, they actually have been doing a lot of research in this space because they were curious about why people are not retiring in time or why people are so stressed out when they are about to enter retirement. And that's something that they had seen over the decades change over time. So they had conducted a study, and essentially one of the things that they found was that folks with emergency savings not only had a higher statistically significantly higher proportion of like job satisfaction, but also job advancement. Like they're sticking around for a longer amount of time and they're advancing up the pipeline. So now if you're a in the leadership and you're trying to create a people strategy where perhaps it's your people that are the product, that your people are creating the revenue, you don't want to have someone that's just joining at the quote unquote bottom rung. You want someone that believes in a pathway up to the top because ultimately, those go-getters are the ones that are going to yield the best results for the business, for the organization over time. So it's a very simple way how all of these things get connected, right? Because again, the core relationship between employer and employee starts with it being about money, and so how we deliver those compensation benefits does end up mattering in terms of inspiring individuals who are joining at different positions along the way.
Oh, and thanks for sharing that, Sid. So just to kind of tie into the question that's in the chat
Yeah.
about whether or not, organizations should list core values, and it sounds like, something that Sunny Day Fund provides, these employee savings accounts for the benefit of reducing financial stress, how people show up at work, connected to their productivity, their engagement, which is something that's very important to me, ties into the organizational culture, in my opinion. And when we talk about values, and I know that Sunny Day Fund has their values on their website, and just for the benefit of the people joining us, respect, collaboration, urgency, resilience, Kaizen, which good enough isn't good enough, um, data-driven work, and transparency. Why do you put those values on your website?
Yeah. So in our case, there's four key stakeholder groups, five depending on how who you talk to, and we think of our values as essentially our rules of engagement across all the different stakeholder groups, right? So one, let's start with ourselves, the employees of the organization, right? Like how we deal with each other needs to embody these values. I think there's a lot of folks that talk about failure, and that being not necessarily a bad thing. We decided to approach that same concept of failure in a slightly different way because for us, the lesson about the failure, like Kaizen, which essentially means that we're going to continuously improve ourselves, as well as the energy to come back uh, from failing in the first place, that resilience piece, like that combination was more powerful than just saying like it's okay if you failed, let's just try again. Like it just didn't punch as well. So like for amongst employees, like that was extremely something. And you know, we've lived through that. Right? Like we've lived through moments where we definitely quote unquote failed as both an organization as or as a group within an organization. But it's how we bounce back and our drive to improve ourselves that was important. Our second stakeholder group our customers. So if we collectively as employees of the organizations, believe in this way of engaging with each other, then it becomes easier for us to understand and level set with our customers that that's how we want to engage with them as well. So for them, transparency and urgency are extremely important. I mean, especially in our case, when we are really focused on like payroll ran today, we want to make sure that people's paychecks are if they're deducted for their savings contributions, that those savings show up in those savings accounts the same day or as quickly as possible, right? Like those are important movements for people. And the same thing with the employees. The employees, the savers themselves, the third stakeholder group are just as important, if not more important, to our mission of enabling financial well-being for all. So again, the rules of engagement with them, it starts out with those values. And of course, if these three stakeholder groups, our employees, our customers, and their users or our the employees that work for those customers, they all of three are in the same page, then we in turn are delivering value to our shareholders. That's the fourth stakeholder group in our case, and as well as our channel partners, our fifth. So that's the way that we approach it. We think of our values as essentially how us saying to each other, these are the things that are going to be important about how we work with each other, so that we are making sure that we're getting off on the right foot and making sure that we're achieving our common objectives together. So you will see things like data driven in terms of what we share with each one of those groups, right? Like like one of the things that we do at the employee level is we have a monthly town hall. I'm reporting out on how we're doing on the revenue side, how we're doing it on our burn side, like how we're taking advantage of big opportunities, what impact we're having on our broader saver population, and like all of those different pieces definitely end up being very interconnected.
Yeah, and as you describe that, and thinking about that connection between communicating and publishing your values and then actually acting on them.
Yeah.
And in response to the question, because my background is in law, I spent 9 years at a law firm from being a paralegal to a mid-level associate, and then spent over 20 years consulting in the legal profession. And oftentimes you see people communicate values and communicate what the organization stands for and their commitments, but then their actions may contradict those values. And for me, I think that can be significantly damaging. So, in answer to the question, I'm all for communicating to the world what your core values are, because you're identifying your brand, you're identifying what your intentional culture is within that organization. But if you do put them out there, I highly encourage you to live by them. And your behavior and actions need to be in alignment with your values. And if that's not the intent, then I would say it might be better for some not to communicate values if people within the organization are not going to see them enacted, and in fact, the actions and behavior may be in contradiction, because I think that can be damaging to the brand, to the culture, and particularly in the legal profession where it's a relatively small community, by and large, it impacts recruitment, retention, and your overall service to your client. Any reaction to that, Sid?
Yeah, as you're talking about that, I was really thinking about the concept of change management, right? And I was sharing with you earlier that we actually started out with um, about 7 years ago or so a different set of values related, almost all of them overlapping, but a different set of values that with feedback from employees as well as other stakeholders that I described earlier, kind of evolved into the ones that you already presented. And for us, there was a lot of change management associated with that. The change management component was about making sure that the words that we were selecting, at least the essence behind those words, were something that, at least at the employee level, we all believed in. We all understood at the board level, certainly, but certainly at the employee level, because again, those are expectations that you're setting with your customer, your clients, your broader set of folks, and in our case, several organizations have shared with us that one of the reasons they chose to work with us over competitors has been because of what we value and how we value it, and like the fact that they actually see it in our thought leadership, and the fact that they see it in our work product, like literally embedded in the software of our product. So I think that it's not just about setting expectations, it's making sure that you're following through on those expectations, to your point.
Yeah. I think it can really detract from the goals and the visions when you don't support your values. And quite often we see that mistake being made in the consulting work that we do in leadership training and culture development work, and can't emphasize it enough that say what you mean, do what you say.
Right.
And whether or not you like it as a leader, your teams are watching you. And if they see any of your behaviors contradict or, as you say, set expectations, if they're not aligned with those expectations, it does have an impact on how they view the organization and their commitment to what the goals and the vision are. And
Yeah.
I hope that that responded to the question. And for those of you joining us, please feel free to ask questions in the chat, share comments, reactions, or your own experiences. We would like this to be highly interactive. And so, Sid, when you talk about culture at Sunny Day Fund, how do you communicate that in a way that the newest employee to the most senior knows what that is?
Yeah. Yeah, great question, especially because we had a new joiner just this month. So, and we're a relatively smaller organization, so we're not exactly a 400,000 person workforce that has classes of people that are joining in different offices, right? So I just want to kind of set the tone of what I want to talk, what I'll be talking about, because I think one of the other things that I'm sure we'll be talking about is empathy. So I think you can appreciate that. Um, I think that having regularity is going to be extreme is ends up being extremely important, right? So, um, for example, whether it's our monthly team-wide calls, where we're talking about the state of the business essentially, or stand-ups for each set of meetings, each set of the teams, or having the ability to have teams connect with each other. I think especially along a customer's journey, like that's something that we're hyper focused on. Like how do we make sure that when a customer joins our organization, we are working with that entity, and it's 1,000 employees, 10,000 employees, whatever it may be, to be able to go through a process that's as seamless as possible. And honestly, that involves every single person in our team that is wearing different hats. Um, so for us, we really focus around regularity, preparedness, follow through with notes and documentation. It's making sure that, like, one of the big things that we're doing from a transparency as a values standpoint is We are pretty good at, relatively speaking, we are pretty good at making sure that we're, taking notes, documenting decisions, and tracking that along the way. And for a new joiner, that ends up being extremely important, because they're seeing the standard at which we're holding each other, and having that new joining individual participate in that process from the very start ends up being important. But for the senior individuals, making sure that they are a part of the process, not just from like a review perspective, but also a sharing perspective, where they themselves can see themselves as an individual contributor. I think that it has been like key. I think that quite often we think of managers as, hey, these people are just coaches. They're not doing anything else. They're not playing on the field. When ultimately the whole reason they got to they may have gotten to that role is because they were really good on the field, or at least having a direct appreciation of field play. I'm kind of mixing analogies because we were talking about football earlier, but you understand exactly where I'm coming from.
Sure. No, and listening to you describe that, where even the most recently added employee can be an individual contributor, and has a set of expectations for how the company is going to engage the employees on a monthly, quarterly basis. Because I recently became aware of a book that's a new book, and it's called The Emotionally Intelligent Team, and it's by a psychologist named Vanessa Druskat, and the forward's written by Daniel Goleman. And
Mm,
and what Dr. Druskat talks about, there's two necessary components to a high performing team. And the first is psychological safety, where that's essentially defined as the person feels comfortable enough where they can admit mistakes. I made a mistake. Or they're comfortable enough where they can reach out to you, Sid, and said, Sid, I noticed in this report you left out this section.
mm.
Without fearing retribution or retaliation or anything like that. And said psychological safety is something we need and it's great, but that's not what motivates and inspires employees. And the other component is belonging, that an employee feels valued, seen, and heard, and that they're vested in and they get to contribute to decision making. The ultimate decision may be different than what they wanted, but they got to participate in the process. So when you have psychological safety and a sense of belonging, you have the formula for developing a high performing team. And Dr. Druskat said she saw teams of highly intelligent people get outperformed by teams that were less intelligent but had psychological safety and belonging, and they worked together to outperform. And is that notion of belonging an important fiber in what you're trying to do at Sunny Day Fun?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that when you're talking about belonging specifically, I think that that is always thinking about what is the special sauce of a again a relatively smaller organization. We're not Fidelity, for example, with its trillions of dollars in assets. So what is it that makes us special? At the end of the day, from an organizational um, uh, a differentiation perspective is agility. So then we think about like what is it that makes us agile? Like what makes us uh, not just move quickly, but in a way where we're learning along quickly along the way. It's exactly the two things that the doctor just like you just pointed out, right? It's a sense of psychological safety, and I definitely agree with you. I think that the psychological safety is much more of a it's table stakes at the end of the day, and it can manifest in different ways, right? It's a lot of the times people think about it as being nice. It's not about being nice. It's much more about like creating an environment where everyone is able to either acknowledge mistakes or being able to reflect on what has happened. And I think that in having concerted processes around that is important. Like being, it's not just about being nice, if that makes sense. But a sense of belonging, we were talking about our new joiner. It's finding very immediate ways to have them see themselves delivering value in the way that the company delivers value. So I'll give you an example here, right? So this individual that just joined our organization, we support a lot of companies and a lot of their employees. Well, they very quickly learned the process, and they very recently ran the like what the essentially the savings contribution process looks like for a fairly complex, large employer, which has seven different legal entities and all sorts of different things. And we have a system that has automated a good chunk of that, but the confidence that comes with someone being able to do it themselves, and more importantly, seeing the impact it has, which ties back to our direct mission, right? People who are who are otherwise earning $18 an hour now end up are now have more dollars in their pockets as a result of what this individual specifically did. And that's a sense of accomplishment. And so that immediate celebration, we found to be really good in creating a sense of belonging. And again, that looks very different for each role in the organization, but there's opportunities to be able to celebrate those moments along the way.
Yeah, and so when I hear that, I think of, this notion of leading with a spirit of care. And I'll pivot to empathy, but I'm a big quote person,
Yeah.
and there's a Teddy Roosevelt quote, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And it's also for me, when you demonstrate care, it's not about like being nice. It's
Yeah.
about doing what the person needs in that moment. So, we coach leaders and managers and facilitate workshops of teams and organizations. And we talk about leading with care and empathy, but this spirit of care, um, where if somebody believes it's being delivered with that care, it still may be uncomfortable, it still may sting. But if I say, Sid, I care about your career growth and skill development because I care, I need to give you this feedback, I could be incredibly direct. And it's, like I said, it still may not be what you want to hear, but if I believe based on my knowledge and experience it's what you need to hear, you may receive it with more um, grace than if I said, Sid, this was terrible, don't ever give me something like this again. And and understanding that, along with empathy, and for somehow, still, it kind of baffles me how empathy has become a controversial word in some circles. I think being empathic just gives you greater understanding of somebody else's circumstances. And this whole notion of creating these employee savings accounts for um, difficult situations, for wellness, for good things like a vacation or traveling. Um, it's not necessarily about being nice, it's more about understanding and connection from my perspective. And earlier in the year you shared with me the Bloomberg article about Peter Stavros at KKR, Colbert, Kravitz, and Roberts, the private equity fund that brought in psychologist Jamil Zaki from Stanford,
Right.
where now you have one of the largest private equity shops in the country talking about empathy as a leadership skill and a must have.
Yeah. And one of the specific things that that psychologist found is that someone with lived experience is hands down a 2x leader. Like those are the folks that you want leading the charge at the end of the day. And so great set of points. I was writing down a couple things as you're saying it. I'm gonna have to look down at my chicken scratch because I wanted to make sure to wash it as well. But so the first thing, what you're talking about with regards to caring, like the Theodore Roosevelt quote, right? It's they don't care how much you know, it's like whether you care, right? And how much you care, and show that you care. It really harkens back to a recent experience that we had with one of our clients. And so let me just first of all describe what we do, because I know that we have had a couple new people join during the call since the introductions. But Sunny Day Fund is an employee benefit. Employers offer this benefit because people by themselves struggle to save in general, and specifically save for emergencies or other things that are going to happen between now and retirement. So, it could be as simple as setting aside a few $100s for Christmas gifts or holiday gifts or a birthday gift. It could be setting aside some money for to go on a vacation. But we've seen folks save up to have kids and start a family, buy a home, become financially confident by virtue of literally just having their own stash of money, their own bag, as the Gen Z way of putting it. They are feeling more financially confident to be able to save up for retirement, right? So now, this employee benefit, sometimes we talk with, new organizations that are contemplating this type of benefit. And so they either say, it's like, our people are fine. We don't, they're earning six-figure wages. They don't need something like this. Or they say, oh, they're barely earning like 40K, 50K per year. They're living paycheck to paycheck. They won't do this. And in both cases, yeah, you might have formed that hypothesis based on something that you have read, and that's okay. But you're definitely not showing that you care in those scenarios, especially because when you go back to the empathy aspect of it, it's like what that individual is actually doing might differ. So, for example, you might have an individual that's making $280,000 per year that is using that paycheck to save up for fertility, or save up for a home, or multiple things at once. And as a result, really, really focused on their immediate short-term narrative. And if you look at it purely from like what you're seeing from a payroll system perspective, you might look at that individual and think, well, wait a minute, like, she just seems financially illiterate. But it's just that you're not seeing those priorities in front of you, or nor immediately understanding, because that may be a little bit too personal of a money situation to share out publicly. And by the way, just not so fun fact, 39% of people making over 250K per year are living paycheck to paycheck, as a heads up. And then on the other side of the house is, someone maybe making like 50K per year, living paycheck to paycheck. They don't have the capability or capacity to even save. So, like, we should rather have them save for retirement rather than all these other things. Well, what's giving them psychological safety is the ability to have $500 or $1,000 to count on when they need it, not, like a sense that there's going to be $5,000 30, 40 years down the line for them. That's important, but it's both of those things together. So we always have clients that are, you kind of say that to us, but then like we have those clients that say that to us and then end up saying, like, you know what, but I'm gonna just offer it to them, and I'm going to show them that I care about this. So recently, we had a leader that said the exact same things, but then her decision was, but you know what? We're going to go through with this, and quote unquote, they're knuckleheads, but they're going to be, they're gonna. Like we're gonna make this so undeniable as an employee benefit. And I'm gonna make sure to communicate this across like all opportunities that I get. And I want you guys to communicate it, like pointing to us. I want you guys to communicate this as well. And let's just see what happens. And she got 82% of her, couple hundred person company to sign up for the program, even though, someone else in that exact same situation said like they won't ever do something like this, right? So I think that if I were to translate what you're talking about from a sense of psychological safety and belonging to having a sense of empathy and leading your workforce, at the end of the day, it's about creating the opportunities for individuals so that they can shine. And I think that these three things that you talked about like tie into that.
Yeah, and I think what builds off of that also is cultivating relationships. And we sometimes we work with teams that experience high conflict. And when our consultants go in and facilitate these workshops or do one-on-one work, or small group coaching work, what we find out is uh, in many cases, the origin of the conflict is that they don't know each other. And particularly in hybrid environments where people spend very little time in person or extended time working collaboratively together, they don't truly know somebody else's strengths and where they have opportunities for growth and where they grew up and what their prior work life was like or what's going on in their personal side. And I once worked with a leader who said, everybody on my team knows I care because I learn about them. I know the names of their kids. I know what kind of pets they have. I know their favorite restaurants. And I build and cultivate this trust because if they have problems or challenges, they'll come to me earlier on in the process so we can develop solutions and deal with it. When there's low trust, what this leader saw, people wait and kick it out until it's a full-blown crisis. And now we have a totally different set of facts and circumstances we have to deal with. So that notion of cultivating trust and what you're describing, it takes effort of leaders to actually have those conversations. And in order to build relationships and cultivate trust, you have to get to know people. And in order to do that, you have to have conversations. And some leaders that I come across don't think that that's a valuable use of their time.
Yeah, I think that the interestingly, as you're talking about this, I've been in the back of my mind, I was thinking about a lot of the return RTO update mandates, that return to work mandates that are coming back, and it's been interesting, like because I think that especially physical presence has an opportunity to showcase that vulnerability a lot, and being able to have those conversations that implicitly carry communication inside of them. Now, where you're able to learn about, kids and their names, sorry, the kids' names and what they're up to and so on. Um, I think that, and I would say that, with what we're doing, I've certainly had an emphasis in trying to meet with all of our team members physically at least a few times per year. But one of the other things that I've learned over the course of the last 5 years is going back to our value of respect. Like we very much value flexibility to get work done, and that's just because like life is hitting each individual in many ways than we can imagine. So, um, removing the physical constraint is one of the few things that we've learned is important. And we're going to make a commitment to meet in person when we can, but we have not implemented one of those return to office mandates as a result of just recognizing that physical flexibility is something that people desire. So, like, how is it that we then build this trust in other ways?
Yeah,
So, we've had to become more creative about that. So that we're not just in as one of our team members calls it, a Brady Bunch Zoom box all the time.
and I think it is also a matter of just capitalizing on those opportunities when you are in person.
Right.
I believe there's this power of proximity that when you're
Yes.
in person, there's a different energy, there's collaboration, there's more communication, and there's more spontaneous learning and mentoring and coaching. And if you can bottle it, great. But if not, I think you need to create these opportunities where that can happen. And I just want to pivot a little bit to a conversation we've had earlier, and I also want to reiterate to the audience: please share questions, reactions, and comments in the chat. But in a previous conversation, you and I talked about the obstacle mindset versus the vision mindset, and there's one program among many that we offer at Loeb Leadership. It's called the Leadership Challenge, and it's a widely used leadership development tool created by two college professors out in California, Barry Posner and Jim Kouzes. And it's about five practices, leadership practices, and one of them is to inspire shared vision, to get your employees, your organization around achieving a vision. And I know that's an important thing to you. And it's difficult to do that. It requires effective communication. It requires buy-in, and it requires leadership to provide the support and resources in order for their stakeholders to achieve these things. Um, However, not everybody's effective at doing that or believes in it. And you and I talked about, if something seems effective and productive and is going to benefit employees or team members, what stops a leader from doing it? What is the roadblock or the barrier? And we talked about people who have the vision mindset. How do we get from here to there? And the obstacle mindset, essentially, if it's not broken, why are you fixing it?
Mhm.
And how do you see that show up in the work that you do when you're trying to work with an organization or a client to understand the benefit of what you do?
Yeah. Um, well, David, I think you recall that I'm a systems engineer, so I I have a tendency to think about life in lots of weird boxes and arrows. Um, and And quite frankly, the obstacle mindset is an example of hiding a piece of the problem so that, just it's a way of when you're saying like if it's not broken, don't fix it. It's like you're really scoping the problem to the point where it doesn't look like a problem anymore. Right? So this and that happens all the time. I as I shared with you, I've done M&A of organizations of $3 billion to $80 billion have handled contracts from $2,000 to $200 million. So it's I've seen things at all sorts of different scale, and it never ceases to surprise me how in one conversation someone will say, hey, we really can't, we can't afford this. And remember, this is someone like I am someone that knows balance sheets and P&Ls through and through, so I know exactly where this is. Sometimes someone says we can afford this, and then I see the exact same expense to the tune of 10x. So people will spend 10 times as much on ZipRecruiter or Indeed and not realize that that is something that is not necessarily yielding the type of value that they're looking to create, like the type of belonging that you talked about earlier. It's not exactly what's yielding there. And just to be clear, this is not me saying something against ZipRecruiter or Indeed. I'm just presenting an example of having like a uh, very scoped decision making. Another example of obstacle mindset is, this is how, we just don't have the capacity, we don't have the time to be able to deliver it. Like there's assumptions behind what are going over there. I think a vision or a dream oriented mindset is much more thinking about like, okay, like let's just imagine that half a workforce does end up having, $1,000, $2,000 more than they have today because of this program. And this is in our specific case, but you can apply it to, other examples. Like, what are the things that will happen? Just what are the things that will happen? They are going to, well, it seems that they will have a tendency to stick around with us for a longer amount of time. It seems that they'll be less stressed out, and their literal working memory and cognitive function, as you know, will end up improving, like their personal RAM. And as a result, they'll make fewer mistakes. It seems that they'll be less reliant on debt, which we know is counteractive to productivity as well. So if we want a more like a differentiated top performing organization, what's to lose in that in this approach? Same thing with like a vision mindset within Sunny Day Fund, right? With our own vision. So at the end of the day, our vision for our organization as well as other the companies that we work for is exactly what we shared, right? Like we want to make sure that every single hardworking American has a few $1,000s of cash savings as their own to count on when they need it. And I know that that sounds like a very small goal, like a couple $1,000s, that's nothing. But that, like the math across the nation shows that it's an extremely hard vision to accomplish. But what our data has proven is that it's accomplishable. So who are the people that believe it the most now? Our own employees. Our own employees see it. I can tell you when we first started this, there were a lot of team members that questioned whether this was even accomplishable on our side, right? Same thing with, I'm sure, with the leadership mindset that you have to have people believe in the five principles and that mindset, and like it makes sure to follow through with it. And now that we've seen the data to be able to know that this is something that actually works, the people who are fervent activists of Sunny Day Fund are our own team members, our own customers, and the savers. Like they voluntarily come to us wanting to share their story. So for us, having it be much more focused around like a clear and stretch vision, something that's honestly not easy, might not even be might not even feel practical. It does challenge the organization to rise to it as an opportunity.
Yeah, no, that's great. A lot of, what you talk about around, wellness and inclusion, most people wouldn't think of financial products or concepts to fit within wellness and inclusion. In fact, I hear it discussed very rarely in wellness conversations, more about stress management and good nutrition and rest and things like that. But I think it's more and more becoming a higher level topic because of what you describe of, even what most would consider high wage earners are dealing with financial distress,
Yeah.
based on their circumstances. And it transcends generations, but particularly Gen Z, young millennials dealing with exorbitant student loan debt, that I hear quite often from clients as impacting how they show up, how they deal with stress and conflict. And, how do you communicate this notion of financial well-being with physical and mental well-being under a wellness umbrella, under an inclusion umbrella, so organizations can embrace it more, if for lack of a better term?
Yeah, I mean, this definitely goes back to what I was just sharing about, the scope of the problem, right? Like what we're really solving is not just a financial health problem or a savings problem. It's a more broader an ability of someone to achieve both health and wealth for themselves, right? So you remember one of our values is data driven. So I'm going to go through some of that data, right? So, did you know that the number one cause of stress is financial stress? It's money related matters. In fact, I can share with you a multitude of funny tweets to me, which are both also sad. It's like if like mental health therapists saying from Ginger, like the company, or Lyra, some of these other ones. It's like if 90% of the people that come and talk with me just had more money, they wouldn't need me, right? Like it's quite often an issue with them having to deal with debt or something else. Like it's that then manifests mentally or physically. One of the top reasons for an inability to sleep, which you mentioned earlier, is debt and money in general. The number one reason that people might not be showing up for some of the healthcare appointments might be a perception of how costly it could be. That's a concept called cost-related non-adherence. So, like, let's say the doctor prescribed to you a certain prescription for, hey, or like I've come in and I have something weird going on with my shoulder over here. They need you to go to physical therapy. Otherwise, they warn you that it might end up being a ligament related surgery. Well, your foregoing an expense associated with that to then draw down an $88,000 surgery down the line. So these things are interconnected at the end of the day. Like whether we like to look at that interconnection or not is up to us as leaders, right? Because we can't just pretend that here's your 401k, here's your healthcare, goodbye. Um, the unfortunate nature of the beast is as folks who are providing compensation benefits, these are interrelated matters. And at least it is for the employees and being able to think about it that way ends up being important. I'll give you one more example. There's a University of Pittsburgh study that looked at a logistics workforce and they looked at drivers and they looked at drivers who traditionally they were thinking about this from a very health driven angle, right? Like how do we lessen the probability of lung cancer manifesting as a result of the individuals smoking more, just like probabilistically, it's like a cultural thing that's existing right there. But then one of the things that they found actually is that, stress, money related stress was one of the big things that rose up in a combination of interviews and studies that they looked at. And so they addressed that problem by through an intervention, essentially automating an emergency savings program. And what they found is that those financially stressed drivers, they ended up seeing an 87% reduction in traffic tickets, right? So if your whole company's predicated on you moving trucks with drivers, and all of a sudden, like you now have better on-time delivery, fewer mistakes, hopefully fewer traffic accidents as a result of people not speeding through it, not being distracted. Like that's a good thing. It's not just if your tickets that you're paying, it's workers' comp going down, commercial liability going down, the health of the individual going up. So it's all to say that money is a thing that manifests in multiple different ways. And it's not to say that money can buy happiness, but certainly there's compensation benefits that can deliver peace of mind. And it's been in our experience, workplace emergency savings is one of them.
Yeah, and as I hear you describe that, I think of the work we do, and several of my colleagues are clinical psychologists or certified
Right.
wellness instructors, and we talk about managing stress and de-escalating stress through nasal diaphragmatic breathing, through meditation. Because to your point about getting fewer tickets, when we're under stress, there's a chemical reaction going on in our
Yeah.
brain, the amygdala, and it starts pumping adrenaline and cortisol into our bloodstream. And as it's doing that, our ability to access our prefrontal cortex, where logic and reasoning is stored, physically becomes impaired because the amygdala doesn't want you thinking, it wants you acting. And you're more likely to do something irrational, like a road rage incident, to your example. And so when you have as many tools as possible to de-escalate that stress, the amygdala, the flow of cortisol is an incredibly corrosive chemical, and it takes a long time to dissipate in the bloodstream. So when you're up at night thinking about money or thinking about that difficult client or coworker, that's cortisol keeping you up in the middle of the night in many cases. So it sounds like, if we were to join forces with our breathing exercise and meditation and financial responsibility and savings, it's a lot of little things. And my personal coach encourages me, do a lot of a little, not a little of a lot, because that incremental change over time turns into substantial change, and it sticks.
Yeah, that's wow. I could not more perfectly uh, capture our messaging with how saving works as well. Right? It's like, a lot of the times like people look at this 3 months or 6 months or a year worth of savings is what they're, trying to get to as something that helps them reach a level of where that anxiety starts going down, right? And the reality is getting to a couple $1,000s, that starts flipping a switch right there. There is a level of um, both a financial but also like a mental safety net that you can reach just by starting to form the habit. Because once you not just start, with whether it's a couple dollars a paycheck or whatever it may be, like you build the confidence that, hey, I've taken that first step. I'm going to keep doing this. I'm going to stretch myself. I'm going to increase it a little bit more. But then it starts manifesting. Right? It's like, hey, I was able to take out $400 when I needed it for my car. So now I'm starting to feel like not only am I committing myself to a solution that could work, it's a solution that has worked and I'll be okay. And that is ability to sleep at night.
Yeah, and at Loeb Leadership, we adopt a similar philosophy in executive coaching and behavior change. It's about incremental change. We're not going to boil the ocean in a day,
Right.
because it's less likely to stick. When we're working with leaders and teams to raise their emotional intelligence, their self-awareness, their communication skills, it's about incremental change, not trying to do it all at once, because there's less likely to have success, if and there's more likely that people will give up if they try to do too much at once, as opposed to breaking it up into, digestible bites.
Yeah, exactly. And to be honest, that's a challenge. It's a really, really, really big challenge. And I think that's a challenge that all high performing organizations have to contend with. Because once you're a high performer, you think that you can, take on those big bites. And there's a discipline to it's not just about delegation, it's about deletion. It's like what am I not doing? Like what do I need to make room for myself so that I am doing some of those incremental things rather than trying to hit the home run each and every single time.
Yeah, and as we're coming up on the hour, we certainly want to be respectful of everybody's schedule. Again, we encourage the audience, if you'd like to share any takeaways or questions or reactions, we certainly welcome that. But Sid, anything stand out for you during this conversation, or just some key points you want to emphasize?
Yeah, I think that for me, there's three takeaways that I just want to focus on. I think one, probably unique to maybe some of the conversations that you're having, David, is that my big takeaway is financial stress matters, and it matters quite often a lot, maybe the most for most working folks, and it almost doesn't matter what the income levels are. And we've seen that savings can really help. A second aspect is if you are an organization that is striving to be values driven, start exploring what that looks like by having those conversations internally. Like, there's a change management component to this where you're talking with employees and starting to align on what that looks like to the external stakeholders as well. And third is essentially what we ended on from a leadership perspective, right? Which is if we know that creating a sense of psychological safety and a culture of belonging are extremely important to creating a high performing organization, how can we approach that not just in what work we do, but how we do that work and how we define the employer employee relationship. So those are kind of the three big things that stood out to me.
Yeah, and for me, it also opened up my eyes to some things, with respect to that financial stress and such a large percentage of the population across income levels. It impacts, how my clients show up and how their teams show up in the workplace. So better to raise that self-awareness and just to emphasize that emotional intelligence, empathy, spirit of care isn't just about being nice and it's not soft, but it's about understanding other people's circumstances so you can share knowledge and experience, so you can give feedback directly without fear of escalating conflict or hurting somebody's feelings. When you have psychological safety and belonging, you have this open line of communication where people believe it's for the betterment of their personal growth or organization, and it's not personal attacks or people being petty.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Yeah. So thank you so much, Sid. I always appreciate and value the conversations we have. Thank you to everybody who attended, and look forward to putting the recording out there for other people to listen and react to it.
Yeah. And thanks so much, David, for inviting me into this conversation and looking forward to the next one.
Yes, absolutely. Have a great day, everybody.
Yeah, cheers. Have a sunny day, as we like to joke.
Have a sunny day.